you see the big smile on my face, and the reason why is because I go after every single person in my sphere that I can that is involved with the Titans, that makes me laugh and smile at the biggest aspect in my heart. And it's incredible what happens when you just reach out. And I had Brad Hopkins, who is a 13-year veteran of the Tennessee Titans. Incredible man. If you haven't got a chance to be able to see his interview, you have to go back and see it. But I was going through on Instagram one time, and Brad made a post, and he does a show with a man, Julian, and I reached out to him, and I didn't think I was going to get a response back. This man is a heralded sportscaster, been on the West Coast, been up in Spokane and Eugene, and now in Nashville. And when I reached out, he connected with me right back. He did tell me that he had to ask his parents if he could be on the show, but it was so great to be able to connect with him. And it's my honor and pleasure because being in this business for the last 6 years, being in media, it's incredible to be able to be around people who are masters at their craft. And so it's an honor and pleasure to bring you. I hope I don't mess up his last name, which I think that I got it down. But Julian Mininsohn is an incredible human being, and I can't wait to be able to share him with you and make this an example that when you want something, just go after it, reach out. The worst thing that could have happened with Julian is that he was going to not be my friend, which was already the case. And so I was already living in the worst possible scenario, and the best possible scenario happened, which he reached out, and now I'm going to force him to be my friend for the rest of his life. So why don't we get this party started?
Yeah, and this the vibe that raised us, made us, saved us. Love so strong that the hard times praised us. From base life roots to the freeway nights, we turn small grooves into launch pad flights. Yeah, this the vibe that raised us, made us, saved us. Love so strong that the hard times praised us. From base life roots to the freeway nights, we turn small rooms into launch pad flights. Grew up on base where the bike ties.
I'm going to bring in Mr. Julian. Here we go. Julian is live with us. What's up, my man?
How you doing, Kelly? How could you not be positive after that tune there at the beginning? I saw Brad liked it as well when he first hopped on the podcast. He was having his head nodding up and down, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Did I say your last name right? Mininsohn?
100%. You got it correct first time. And you're in an elite group of people who get it right the first time they say it. My grade school teachers had trouble with that one, that's for sure.
Hey, Julian, this is kind of cool. It's the inaugural episode that we've done. Your episode number 819, but it's the first one that's actually streaming live on Instagram. Also, we stream live on Substack and on YouTube, but this is the first time on Instagram that we are doing it. So I just wanted to tell you that you're making history today, my brother.
Oh, I'll take it. I think when it comes to making history, especially in a very competitive profession, any type of history that you can make is positive. So I'll take it. And hello to the Instagram live viewers out there. That's for sure.
So, Julian, you started off in Long Beach. We were talking about this. Long Beach, you went to Laverne. Was your first assignment there in Spokane?
No. So actually, right after I graduated school at Laverne, California, I went to Grand Junction, Colorado, which is the middle of nowhere, right on the border between Colorado and Utah, probably equidistant 4 hours between Salt Lake City and Denver. And if you know anything about sports broadcasting, you would know that a lot of times you need to start in a small beginner market. And that's what Grand Junction was. It was, lower level collegiate stuff. The Junior College Baseball World Series there. That's kind of the claim to fame of Grand Junction, and a lot of high school sports. So it's very much get your toes wet and throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks. And was there for about a year and a half, 2 years before I went to Eugene, Oregon to cover the Ducks and the Beavers. And then I went to Spokane after that, covering Gonzaga, Washington State, and everything that Eastern Washington has to offer before eventually landing here in Music City.
So tell me this, how does the personality of the city determine the stories that you tell in sports?
Oh, man. Well, I would say that particularly in local news, which is what I've been in for the last 10 years, of course, we are going to have the stories on the star players of the football team, the basketball team, some of the major developments with sports facilities in the cities. But I think where we make our bread and butter the most is those kind of sublime athlete stories on the back roads of Oregon, right? The wrestler who has one arm that is winning championships, or in Grand Junction it was the swimmer who is dealing with a terminally ill disease, but she's winning Paralympic gold medals. Here in Nashville, I can probably name the ping pong player who was a USA player. Now he's a table tennis coach for the next generation. So I think where local news particularly and cities separate themselves as far as great stories is the type of people that are there and the stories that you would least expect. Those are some of my favorite to tell. If I could do that for the rest of my life, I totally would. Of course, covering the Titans is awesome, Kelly, and I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit. Covering the Oregon Ducks is awesome. Covering Washington State and Gonzaga basketball was awesome. But where I think a lot of markets separate themselves is those unique stories that you can find that will get people talking at the water cooler the next day at work. And that is one of the reasons why I do what I do.
How do you protect yourself though from becoming a fan and then having a slanted view of the sports that you're actually covering?
Yeah, that is very difficult because I do this because I am a sports fan, right? I think sports is the greatest reality TV that we have. I think that there is nothing in American culture that brings us together more than sports. It ties together different backgrounds, languages, political affiliations. I think that's what we're seeing right now with the soccer going on in North America. But over the years, you kind of learn practicing skills to kind of separate yourselves. Now, what I will say to this, and I've talked about this with Brad Hopkins on our show that we do our Titan show together. And, Brad is a player. He's going to root for the organization. He is going to want to have the organization's best interest in mind, being from there. I never grew up a Titans fan. However, I will say this, the job is more fun when they win. A lot of people, I think, get it misconstrued that most media goes into these locker room situations and wants to get the gotcha moment, wants to get the clicks, the viral moment, and maybe expose athletes. I don't fall under that ilk, and I think more than not, a lot of my peers don't either. I want to go into a locker room after a win and ask them, how did you do that? And I want to go into a locker room and say, what led to this triumphant moment for you guys? That's more fun than getting a ticked off athlete at the locker room who doesn't want to talk to you. So while I have to separate myself from being a fan and cheering for certain teams that I cover, that doesn't mean that I don't want them to win for the sake of, selfishly, the job. You know what I mean? It is more fun that way.
Did you grow up a Rams fan?
Yeah. They weren't in LA when I was growing up. It was St. Louis at that time. But obviously the Rams coming back made it easier. I will say this, it was an easy team to adopt when they came back because of how good they are and how much they go for it, and obviously winning a Super Bowl recently. But growing up, actually, the football team that a lot of people in Southern California gravitated to in my time as a young person was USC football. That was like the Matt Leinart, Pete Carroll, Reggie Bush days. My younger brother, I have two younger brothers, but the oldest of the two is a huge USC football fan. He would go to a lot of games since he was young, and we would go, down on the field to get field passes and meet Pete Carroll and Rodney Peete and watch, Lightning and Thunder with Reggie Bush and Lendale White. And so those were the USC football teams. That was the pro football team when I was going up through grade school. But yeah, the Rams are a pretty good team to root for too. I'll say that.
We went to that national championship game. So I ended up, one of my buddies had tickets. We got a chance to go to UT against USC. obviously we were cheering for Reggie Bush, Thunder and Lightning, which Lendell became a Titan, which I think solidified his greatness and his legend, because anyone on the Titans, you know what I mean? It just, it makes them an even better person. I think there's a different level of heaven. Would you agree with me on this? For a person who's been on the Titans, there's levels of heaven, is what they say. And I think the highest level is when you become a Titan. Would you agree with that, Julian?
Being here for the last 2 years now, I think there is maybe an even higher heaven that this team is trying to get to.
Yes.
But it's interesting because when you talk about Lendell White and some of these other former Titans, like Brad Hopkins, even for example, they come here to Nashville and they stay here. A lot of them have stakes in the community. They have they've planted their flag and their families here. It seems like a really, I don't know, a huge in community when it comes to the organization and the alumni that pass through that want to stay here and build something, whether it's local businesses or just raising families.
Well, I've been in contact with Zach Pillar. He's going to be on the show soon. But Zach Pillar is a pillar in the community also. His wife and him have the bars, sports bars there. A lot of times we were talking earlier about the linemen and the linemen not getting as much fanfare, but also in the event that, say, like a Brad Hopkins wasn't doing his job, a Steve McNair wouldn't have the legend that he has. Does that make sense? Eddie George,
Yeah.
who and what's so great is, with a legend like Eddie, and I got a chance to be able to have Eddie on the show too. I actually, what I did, Julian, is I just sent him a message for 3.5 years. So I would send him a video message almost, once every 2 to 3 days. And I did this for 3.5 years until he just got sick of me and said, I just got to get rid of this dude. So I got to have him, I got to be on his show. And when Brad and I were talking about it, again, if in the event that Brad Hopkins or the linemen didn't do their job, the star players and the skill players wouldn't have the accolades that they did. What have you learned about linemen since you've been working with Brad?
They are truly the unsung heroes of the football team. I mean, and Brad probably says it once a show that, it all starts up front. It all starts in the trenches, guys. And that's one of the reasons why he and I are maybe a little bit more worried about this coming Titans team, because the offensive line still has a lot of questions. And, as a Titans fan, I'm sure you want Cam Ward to ultimately reach his full potential, but he doesn't do that unless the offensive line delivers. And so, in all my years of covering sports, whether it's been Division III, junior college football, to Division II, to high-profile Division I programs, to now the Tennessee Titans, the offensive line has some of the best speakers and valedictorians that you could have in a locker room. They just don't get to be in front of the camera a lot of times because we all want to talk to the quarterback. We all want to talk to the Cameron Wards or the Steve McNairs or the Eddie Georges, right? But once you get those linemen talking, not only are they very eloquent in the way they speak, but they understand the game because they know just as much as the quarterback does, because they have to block for the guy. They are in a way an extension of the smartest player on the field. They know the playbook inside and out. They know the game inside and out. And they know really, it's truly a position that you're working in unison. It's the only position, I think, on the football field that really isn't a one-on-one position. You are working as a group of 5. And so, I've enjoyed my time learning from somebody like Brad Hopkins, but even take somebody that's currently on the roster like a Peter Skoronski, who is one of the de facto leaders of the Titans right now. We have a interesting kind of like media award that we give out, called the Media Good Guy Award. We give it to the person who is the most gracious with their time in the media on the Titans team. And Peter won it this past year after, from his first few years, not being the biggest talker, but he kind of stepped up in that role and has opened up a lot more. And I think that just kind of shows that once you get these linemen talking a little bit, the stuff that they give out, man, is just like media gold.
What have you learned about Carnell Tate since he got to the city? The connection point for us, which is wild. My daughter is going to be a senior this year at Carlsbad High, and so she went to high school with Julian Mininsohn. And seeing those two and that connection point, and then with him coming into the Titans, what do you see this year for Carnell?
Man, that's a bad dude right there. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I don't want to get your hopes up, Kelly, because we've only seen him in highlights from Ohio State and a few unpadded OTA and rookie minicamp practices, right? But the guy looks every bit of the part as the next star wide receiver in this league. I mean, he was making one-handed catches through contact like it was nothing, like he'd been in the league for years. And, you know, it's such an interesting thing because I was at the draft in Pittsburgh this year, and I was in the media room when Carnell Tate was picked. And I think that got the biggest gasp throughout the media room of the night because, you know, everybody was talking about, oh, the Titans need a pass rusher, or the Titans are going to get Jeremiah Love. And it seemed like fans and media were kind of set on one of those two options. But when Carnell Tate was picked, I was like, did we even talk to Carnell Tate throughout this week leading up to the draft? Because we were so gung-ho that it was going to be a defensive guy. And at least early on, he has put any of those criticisms and rumors about whether he was worthy of the pick or not to bed. Now, I do think that he can have a rookie of the year type season. But again, is he going to be able to get the opportunities from Cam Ward? And is Cam Ward going to have the ability to throw to him and have time if that offensive line doesn't block him up front? So there we go, a full circle moment for you.
What do you think about the defense this year? I mean, looking at it, you know, obviously Jeffrey Simmons, we just re-signed Jeffrey Simmons, which I think is amazing. But what's your take on the defense?
I think at least the defensive line is probably the strongest unit on the team. I mean, you mentioned it right there, to lock up a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who is not just the best player on the team, right? He's kind of the heart and soul. Like, this is his team. And it's just so funny because he didn't participate in a lot of the team stuff during OTAs this year, but he was out there doing some individual work, and the tone of the practice just changes when he's out there. And so that defensive line, I think, is going to be nasty with Jeffrey Simmons and John Franklin Myers. I was talking to a lot of other experts from different national networks, and they all say the same thing about the defensive line for the Titans. They say, hey, good luck trying to block those guys. And combined with Robert Saleh, who his defenses have been good everywhere he's gone. I will say this. I like the secondary guys that they brought in, Alontae Taylor and Cordell Flott. However, I will say if there was a quiet concern on this team, it's probably there just because there is a lack of depth maybe behind those guys. But with that said, a secondary doesn't need to be in coverage as long if you have Jeffrey Simmons and John Franklin Myers up front rushing the passers. So I think they have the ability to be a top 10 defense this year.
What do you think about what's your take on the coaching staff? Now, I'll give you, you didn't ask, but I'm going to give you mine. And this was tough for me because I've been a fan since I was 6. I got a jacket from my parents. They got me an Oilers jacket, and I think it was because it was on sale because the Oilers were garbage at the time. But it's like we all have that story, like our dad, gave us something, and then we became a fan forever. I wish that he would have paid for therapy throughout my years. Although what it did is it created an irrational fandom that I have, which every year I believe we're going 17-0, home field advantage. We win the Super Bowl. Maybe we give up a couple touchdowns throughout the season, but there's always downsides to a season, right? But this was a tough offseason for me because when the coaching change happened, number one, I don't think we should have got rid of Vrabel in the first place. Although after last year's scandal, I'm glad that we got that we moved on. Does that make sense? And it made me think too on this, Julian, did the Titans know something that we didn't know before, and that caused this situation? But let's bring it to today. When I look at it, Robert Saleh didn't win in New York. He went to San Francisco and was a defensive guy there, but I don't understand. This was tough for me. I didn't understand them bringing in somebody to be able to kind of reform the organization that wasn't a winner where he was before, and then to bring in Dable, and Dable had a team that was absolutely garbage also. So this was a tough thing, although now they're my guys, so I gotta root for them and behind it. But you see a little something. What are you seeing there in Tennessee with the new coaching regime?
Well, when I came in to Nashville and first covered the Titans, it was the back end of Brian Callahan's first year. And something that was very apparent, and I'm sorry if that gives you PTSD for these last 2 years that the Titans have had, but something that is very apparent is that they were missing a guy with experience. And Brian Callahan was somebody who, don't get me wrong, very nice man, the nicest guy you could ever meet when it comes to a head coach. But to me, it didn't seem like he had a grasp on building a culture and a foundation. And that's okay. Some coaches maybe just be better served as position coaches or offensive coordinators. I think when you bring in somebody like Robert Saleh, who's done it and has failed and knows what his transgressions were in New York, not to mention it was the freaking Jets and nobody wins over there. But you got a guy who is a culture guy, no nonsense. He's a rah-rah guy. And then you've built kind of an Avengers of a coaching staff around him. I mean, we know what Brian Daboll's done when it comes to developing young quarterbacks. You know, he developed Josh Allen and a slew of others. You have arguably the best special teams coordinator in the entire game in John Fossil. You have guys that both of these coaches, whether it's Robert Saleh or Brian Daboll and the position group coaches they've worked with before. And so I think what you're seeing now is a clear, I think, culture change. I understand the hesitancy to have what makes Robert Saleh different this time as opposed to his time with New York. And I think it's the exact thing that I just mentioned, and it's experience and knowing what you're doing now. I think he needed to get away a little bit and reclaim his joy again. And that's what he got in San Francisco, because he did a lot with a very depleted defense over there in San Francisco and made them, a playoff contending team. The first show you did, Kelly, is probably not going to be as good as show number 819, right? And so the more times you do something, the more it works out. And I think that's what you're going to see with Robert Saleh as his second stint as a head coach, because it does feel a lot different. And he has talked about the number of ways that he has changed since that first head coaching stint with the Jets.
When you see things from the inside, I mean, obviously, your job has kind of changed with the onslaught of the internet, because stories break a lot faster than they used to. Yeah. So a story used to break for us. It was watching ESPN or watching the local sports network. Now things are breaking on Twitter. They're breaking on Instagram. They're breaking on all these different things. How has that impacted your work, and how do you adapt to it and stay in front of it?
Yeah, social media, as I'm sure running a podcast is a full-time job now. We are in the digital age. I can even tell you that at my station, yes, we are prioritizing what we put on TV at 4, 5, 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock every day. However, we have adopted also a digital first approach. Promote your stories on social media, put out sound bites from these players that can be shared, put it on Facebook, do Facebook lives or Instagram lives to give people perspective, because the content wheel doesn't necessarily stop in the digital age, right? Like we don't watch a full on Sports Center anymore. I still remember where I would sit down like at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and watch Sports Center from beginning all the way to the end when they did the top 10 plays. Now I've seen all the highlights before the show even begins. And so it is a little tougher. You're very much a mobile video, social media journalist in today's age. But it's one of those things that it's kind of inevitable, because especially in sports where we're watching NBA free agency right now, and all of the trades and moves seem to be going on through there. NFL free agency, obviously, when the Titans were making a bunch of moves, it was all broken on Twitter first. And that not only has it gotten to the point where news breaks on there, that's where a lot of the open discussion happens as well. And so to have a perspective and knowledge on things that I could go and talk about on TV, you got to constantly be tapped in. So it is difficult. It is also tough to filter out a lot of the, I guess, for lack of a better word, BS that's out there. But you have to understand that it is a part of media and culture, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. And so the best way to do that is to do your job the most professional way you can on social media. And that's what the hope is that we try to do. Hopefully I'm not talking too crazy out there when we post our Titan shows, but yeah, it's a totally different world, man, than when I first got in the business.
Who was your kind of legends that you looked for? You were talking about watching SportsCenter. Did you watch SportsCenter growing up and then say, like, that's what I want to do? Or was there an inspiration for you early on?
Well, I always tell this story when people ask me that. I as a Southern California native, the Lakers were my favorite team. They're my favorite sports team. And Kobe Bryant is my favorite athlete of all time. And so I still remember 7 years old, sitting with my dad on the couch watching Lakers games. That was at the height of the Kobe Shaq era. And Kobe would do what Kobe does, a fadeaway jump shot or a crazy alley-oop dunk or something of that nature. And I would be sitting there asking my dad, how did he do that? How did he do that? And my dad didn't have an answer because Kobe is Kobe. And then, I grew up playing basketball. But I'll tell you, Kelly, I am 5'11" on a good day when I stretch. And I knew right away that I said, hey, I'm not playing Division I hoops. I'm not going to the NBA anytime soon, but I do love sports. And so let's tell some sports stories instead, And so I always watched SportsCenter growing up. I played all different sports growing up, but I think it was just the curiosity to, tell people and give people a slice of life of sports that I get so excited about that I want them to be just as excited about hearing about my passion for sports and why I love it so much and why it matters. And so I think there wasn't necessarily one person. I mean, there are broadcasters I look up to. I love Kevin Harlan. I love Tom Rinaldi. I love Gus Johnson, guys like that. But I think it was more of the way that sports makes me feel is the way I want other people to feel about it.
It was interesting because just the other day, actually, was it 2 days ago? I just had Lee Steinberg on, who you should interview. Lee Steinberg. The dude is unreal. He's a Southern California guy. But we were just talking about it, and we were talking about the highs and lows of economies, right? And so when there's a bubble and things are going unbelievable, there's always inevitably a downside to that. There'll be a valley, and then it'll grow and it'll grow and it'll grow. And I asked him, I said, we seem to be in a bubble in sports, and it just keeps going. And when and what will happen if the fall happens? And he said, sports is the only thing that will continue to grow no matter what, even in the Great Depression, even in those things. And I never heard that perspective before. Did you know that when you went into this profession?
I don't say I would say that I didn't know it completely, but I will say that I've grown to understand that more and more as we've gone on. And look, in another way that the social media and digital age is changing local broadcasting is like, you see stations across the country folding. People don't necessarily watch a whole newscast the same way that we don't even watch a whole sports center anymore. And so local TV stations, I think, are trying to change the way they do things with a digital first approach, with live streaming, with social media. But a constant in all of that, no matter which station that you watch, live sports will never die. We will always have the anchoring to sit down on the couch with a bag of chips and a six pack and say, let's turn on this game. Let's turn on this college football game on Saturday. I mean, you're seeing the numbers that the World Cup is doing right now. It's unbelievable. And so, I'll go back to what I said earlier, in that I think sports is the ultimate reality TV. I think it is the way that we connect to each other. I think there is no bigger culture mover in our country right now than sports and the conversations that it brings up. It causes not only debates at barbershops, it causes debates on podcasts and family homes and gets people to get outside and go to live events. And so, I'd agree with him in the sense that kind of passion and just flag in the culture will never die in our lifetimes.
So we were having a discussion too about there's, what was it, 2 or 3 major components. One being NIL, number 2 being gambling, and number 3, the TV contracts, meaning the amount of money that's influxed into sports. And he said that there's those 3 elements, when you put them together, can be very volatile. And so you're seeing things break right now in NBA as far as, point shaving and with the gambling and stuff like that. I was having this discussion with my friend the other day, my friend Will, and I joked with him. He got mad at me, and I said, I think that they should allow you to bet on yourself. And he was like, wait a second, that would kill sports. And I said, but in every other business, I bet on myself when I started the podcast. Like, no one understood what it was 6 years ago. I bet on myself, and I'm not saying that I won, but in every aspect of my life, I've had to bet on me. And I was joking with him because I wanted to, it's my best friend. So, since 4th grade, so I'm giving him a little bit of business. And he's like, that would kill the sport. That would do all this stuff. And I said, it's already happening. It's already happening. And the more that you make something outlawed, the more of a black market there'll be for something. But when you take a ESPN, and then an ESPN has a betting app that you can bet on, but the sportscasters are giving you the commentary starting up, leading up. Do you think that it's a healthy thing for sports organizations to have a betting organization that is all tied to it? And then, what's your take on that?
Yeah, personally, no. And it is a very slippery slope, right? Because you have these insiders breaking information that could impact betting lines, which could impact the way you bet and how you spend your money, and potentially lose your money. I think it was, and I implore people who are listening to this to look it up because I don't remember off the top of my head all of the details. But Shams Charania, who is the lead NBA newsbreaker that we have today, was working, I believe it was FanDuel, during the NBA draft a few years ago, when he was talking about how I think it was Brandon Miller might go either 2nd or 3rd overall or something to that extent of the draft order, which totally changed the lines on FanDuel. And he ended up not going at the position where he was projected. And so something like that could ultimately, hurt people's pockets. And we're seeing it now with Brendan Sorsby. He's a big topic of discussion. The Texas Tech quarterback who was, I think it was like $90,000 he bet, a lot of which were those on his own games, and it questions the integrity of the sport. The NBA, we're seeing it with guys like Terry Rozier and Malik Beasley. And so it is a slippery slope when these networks are in bed with these betting companies, but these networks are also telling you insider information that could impact lines. And so, full disclosure, I have an agent who, looks for the jobs for myself and represents me when it comes to TV broadcasting. And he hit me up one time when we were looking for a job. I think it was after Spokane, and my contract was coming up, and he was like, well, would you be interested in getting into the betting space? And I said, no, I don't feel comfortable telling people, whether it's directly or indirectly, how they should spend their money and what picks that they should make. And so that's where I fall on that line of things. Maybe I'm a little bit more of a purist on that front. I don't condemn sports betting. I know it's a big part of the culture now, and it gives people a little bit extra stake to watch their sports, and maybe gets people to tune in, maybe otherwise maybe that they wouldn't have. But when it comes to the connection between betting and the sports networks, that's where it's a little bit dicey for me.
Tell me the name of the Texas Tech quarterback again. I forgot his name.
Brendan Sorsby.
Okay, so Brendan Sorsby, what I said to my buddy, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I said if he was better, this wouldn't be a story. And when you look at it, the traditionally in American sports, I'm not saying that it's right, but most of the time, if a person is a elite, the story kind of dissolves, and we see this happen over time, right? The better the person is, the less the headline happens. And the worse the player is, the more that they get crucified. Do you think that there's a correlation there, or is that just my view?
You know what? I might respectfully push back a little bit on that.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he is the most important player on the field, which is the quarterback, and the fact that he was the top transfer target for any team in the offseason makes it more of a story. For example, if this happened to the third string wide receiver, nobody would care because Texas Tech would come out right away and say he's no longer on the team. But because he is the quarterback, and because now with NIL dollars, you are investing millions of dollars into transfer quarterbacks, into your roster. There are donations from these collectives that are paying these players to come to these big time schools. And there's a lot of dollars on the line when it comes to revenue and TV and potential college football playoff appearances. Because he is such a valuable position, I think that is why it is such a big story. Now, is he a Fernando Mendoza, for example? Is he a Cam Ward like he was at Miami? No, he is not. But I think the fact that he is a quarterback at a big time school made this more of a story than it is. And I think if it was any other, I guess, lower level position on the depth chart, Texas Tech would come out and just, do the right thing. But it's not that easy when the entire stake of your football team is on this guy's shoulders. And so, do I agree with the lack thereof accountability that led to ultimately him having no other choice but to take accountability? I honestly think that this is kind of the only way that he's going to be able to learn to change, in the sense that he's going to have no options and is going to have to rebuild from the ground up. That's how it kind of should be. Like we have to learn consequences and things of that nature. And there would have been no consequences and nothing learned if he just goes back and was allowed to play right away.
It makes sense. I mean, I guess from a fan perspective. So I don't know. Are you able to still be in? Are you still able to be in both sides? Because you're covering the stuff. You're breaking news. You're doing that stuff. Do you have the capacity right now to be a fan?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the tough thing for me is, because I'm usually covering sporting events, I don't have time to go as a fan. But the lucky thing for me is that I'm in a place where Nashville is such a growing sports city. But I didn't grow up here, and I don't have any fandom ties to the teams here. So it allows me to at least separate the two. But, during Lakers season, I'm sitting here on my couch in my living room screaming at the TV. You know what I mean? Like during Rams football season, as long as they're not playing the Titans, when I wouldn't never cheer in the press box. I mean, the Rams played the Titans here in Nashville last season, and the Rams beat them. I wasn't cheering in the press box. But outside of that, totally. Yeah, I could root for my team. I think one thing that has, I guess that's grown for me as a person since being in broadcasting for 10 years now is that I have been able to separate the two and look as a fan for the teams that I do root for, look at it a lot more logically than irrationally, as a lot of fans typically do. And so I have a little bit more of a level head when it comes to even my own teams. And that's probably just for me having to be even keeled when it comes to covering the teams that I do professionally. But absolutely. I mean, you will never talk to a sports broadcaster who says that they don't do this because they dislike sports and they're not a fan of sports. All of us are. And that's one of the reasons, at least, that a lot of us get into this thing, is because there was already a passion going into that. And I don't think that ever goes away.
For you, in the broadcasting side, my son is very interested in it. And so he's going to be super excited that I get a chance to be able to talk to you. I'm going to try and help him to understand that his dad is cool, because now I have a friend named Julian, and I'm going to force you to be that way for the rest of your life.
That's cool.
With my son, like he just applied at Carlsbad High. They have a pretty big broadcasting, portion of their school. There was only 12 kids that got chosen. He didn't get chosen. So he's a freshman. And I told him, I said, stick in it. What would you say to him as far as, on that journey? And then also too, like, what does the journey actually look like? Because most of us think you want to be in broadcasting. Someone comes and touches you with a wand. Now you're broadcasting, the greatest team of all time. It's the whole team and organization should go in the Hall of Fame as the first NFL team, which is the Titans, should go in and be inducted into the Hall of Fame. We all feel that. We all know that to be true. But what would you say to my son at 14 years old, not getting into broadcasting as a freshman?
You're going to hear a lot more no's than you're going to hear yeses in this line of work. And I think he should use it not as something to knock him down and not as something that he could be, that he's going to be disappointed and quit over. Because even after, a number of markets and different experience, when every time I've looked for a job or my agent has looked on behalf of me for a job, there have been a lot of no's and a lot of disappointment. And it makes the yeses that you get that much more sweet. There are a lot of things that broadcasters up and coming, whether they're going into high school or college, that they can do aside from being in a broadcast program to get a job. Look, my path was a little bit unconventional. And I have a number of people I could probably name off two hands and 2 feet that took an unconventional approach and weren't necessarily in a broadcast journalism program, but they are long careers in broadcasting and sports broadcasting. And so when I went to Laverne, I really just wanted to be a writer. I wanted to do newspaper and television, or newspaper and online publication. I wanted to be like a beat reporter writer for a team, right? But then I saw the writing on the wall, no pun intended, that there was the digital age and social media age was growing. And so I wanted to dive into television and radio broadcasting. But even then, I felt like coming out of school, I had the beefiest resume possible. I interned for, ABC 7 out there in Los Angeles. I had high profile interviews on my tape with Kobe Bryant and Vin Scully. And I was, the lead sports broadcaster at my school. And I thought that it was a shoo-in to get a job. And I didn't get a job until a year after I graduated. And, was it disappointing? Absolutely. Because you kind of have a vision board and a plan for yourself and a timeline of how things are going to go a lot of times. And it wasn't going that way. And so I had to sift through a lot of the frustration and disappointment and strap up my boots and say, okay, well, what can I do in this meantime to put me in a buddy? I remember going around town to the different venues in Southern California and shooting stand-ups as if I'm doing stories on these teams to just practice and get reps on camera, even if it wasn't going anywhere. The biggest comparison that I would give sports broadcasting and broadcasting in general to is a lot like acting. Leonardo DiCaprio and I'm sure, Matthew McConaughey or whatever other great actor you want to name has been passed up for roles, right? That doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad actor. Right. But broadcasting is a front facing profession to where maybe you're not the exact look that they wanted, or maybe you don't have the experience that they wanted, or maybe you're in a different pay bracket that these stations want. Maybe, the station wants a woman reporter or somebody of a different ethnic background. And so there's a lot of factors that go into people landing jobs in broadcasting aside from just talent alone. And so I think that's something early on that I didn't understand going in that I definitely do now. And in the case of your son, I think that there are so many avenues that he can go to become a great broadcaster, and so many stories that he can hear from people who took an unconventional approach that ultimately landed long careers in this business that would only motivate instead of deter.
One of the guys I was talking to, his name is Mike Ganino, and he was a stand-up comedian, and then he took that and he started training keynote speakers, which I thought was interesting because he brought in the concept of workshopping. And when he was talking about workshopping, he was saying that most comedians go to a small club that no one knows them, and then they try out a new set. And they workshop something, they workshop a joke or a set or a bit until they refine it, and then they take it to the stage. Where were some other places? I think I've never heard of a sportscaster. Did you have your phone turned like you were filming the game and then you were talking into it as it was, or were you doing the thing facing towards yourself?
I was doing an audio recording of my play-by-play, that what it would sound like as if I were calling that game.
Wow.
And I've done that in multiple high school games when I was kind of climbing through the business. I did it at sporting events that maybe I just pay to go as a fan. And maybe I say, you know what, I'm going to stand over here in this concourse of this Angels game and do an inning. And it would help not only to build out a tape that I could send to potential employers of how I sound on air, and maybe if it was on camera, for example, how I would look on air doing it. But it would just get you reps. You know what I mean? Like I think it's just a valuable way to practice when you don't have the capabilities and equipment to go live all the time. You know what I mean? Now I think it's a lot different than, I get practice every day going live on for our Titans show. But climbing as a broadcaster, the resources are very limited. And so I had to find ways to not just keep up with my craft, but also continue to have current works out there that I could send to people that say, hey, like, this is what I would sound at like a play-by-play of my high school game. This is how I would sound at a play-by-play of a professional game, and kind of do it that way. So again, it was a little embarrassing sometimes at times because there'd be people who look over and be like, what is this guy talking about? Why is this guy talking to himself in the corner of this high school basketball game? But it was all for a purpose. And I think, putting yourself out there and doing that kind of stuff, I'm a big believer that ultimately the hard work will get you somewhere. I think that's probably the number one thing that I learned from an athlete like Kobe Bryant, in the sense that you can't cheat it. And if you don't cheat it, you're ultimately going to get rewarded. It may not be at the timeline that you want, but it'll ultimately happen. And you will feel better about yourself, not cheating yourself and not cheating the game in a way.
Man, it takes me a second because to hear that type of resolve, and I mean, it's genius. Do you still have some of the recordings?
I believe I should. It was a couple iPhones ago, so I would have to look through my cloud.
Could you do me a favor and go through them? Because what I would like to do is I'd love for you to send me even just one of the innings or just a clip, and I want to link it on the podcast because I want people to see like the reality part of it, because when they look at a polished person, and I want to compliment you, man, you're an absolute inspiration. And coming into this business, like, you're not only an inspiration because the TV side and you're covering the greatest sports team of all time that's ever been in the history of sports. But also too, man, in doing the research on you've always been about telling the story of the person who happens to be playing the sport. And that type of signature, I think, is so important because a lot of times, my mom taught me very early on not to be a respecter of persons, not to look at what they did, but look at who they were. And once that started happening, it started opening different doors. When did you learn that part, and who did you learn it from?
I probably, and I'll say this, the idea of connecting with people and telling their slice of life story of who they are, it didn't come right away. And I still think that there's a lot to improve on when it comes to that for myself. But I have a mentor who spent, over 10 years, I think 15 years in this business. His name is Brian Formica. I want to shout him out. He was a sports broadcaster in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for a long time. And he actually, he's out of the business now, but he actually lives in Nashville. And it's crazy that, I moved here, and then he also lives here as well. It was very much a situation like one night I was sitting at my station in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is the first market we talked about that I worked in. And I really wanted to take my work to the next level. I felt like I got my feet wet but there was something that I felt like was missing that got me from one job to the next. And so I was just searching YouTube, going down a rabbit hole on YouTube, like a lot of us do. And I found a story of his on a one-armed golfer that he had, that he told this story, and it won some awards out there in North Carolina. And I don't know what it was about the story. If it was about the person that he shined a light on this person so well that it made me want to root for a guy that I've never met before. And so I just took a shot in the dark, a lot like you did with me, and sent Brian a message and found his email and said, "Hey, here's my work. I loved your story. I know I'm not asking for a job at your station. I'm not asking for, you to tell me the secret sauce. All I just want is your time." And that night he emailed me back and gave me a phone call and had been a mentor from then on pretty much my entire career. And he gave me tools in my tool belt to tell stories like the one that he told about the disabled golfer. And so, Kelly, what I will say about this industry is, I love watching sports and getting paid to talk about sports for a living. It is awesome. I mean, like it is, I'm not going to lie to you. It's freaking cool, right? To get paid to go to sporting events. If you ask me why I'm in this business, at the beginning of my career, I probably would have said that. After connecting with Brian and other mentors in this business, the reason why I do what I do is I love making people feel something. I love making people feel the way that Brian's stories make me feel, the way Tom Rinaldi's stories make me feel. I am a strong believer that you never forget the way people make you feel. Like we probably all have like that, the guy or girl who broke our heart, right? The friend that you can call up at any time and they're going to give you a laugh. And those, when I say that, you're probably thinking of that person and picturing their face right now because they made you feel a certain way. And so my goal as a sports broadcaster is if I can make one person, whether they're a sports fan or not, feel some sort of emotion every night, then I've done my job. And it could be any type of emotion. It could be happiness. It could be sympathy for a person I'm doing a story on. It could be, it could be laughter. It could be even anger at a way that an athlete or a coach's decision is being made. As long as I get you to feel something that it makes the work memorable and that gets you coming back, and that's total fuel for me. So, I think that's kind of where it started, and I'm slowly growing into hopefully continuing to do that for the rest of my career.
So it was interesting because as a young kid, I remember reading about Martin Luther King for the first time. And when I read about him, and he had doctor in front of his name. And that intrigued me. But as I read about it, I realized why he did it, because it talked about the fact that when he first started off, he was in the rooms with a lot of men who had doctor in front of their name. And so he went and got his PhD and got his doctorate, not because he wanted it, but because it gave him entrance into a room and into a conversation where someone could say, "I'm a doctor." He could say, "So am I. Let's put that down and be humans." There are always points of interest or points of entry into industries or scenarios. Like my brother, he's an attorney. What I told him forever, he's not a watch guy at all. I said, once you put a Rolex on your wrist, the conversation will change. Rooms will change. Access will change. It doesn't mean that you have to be focused on the Rolex, but it does drop the barriers sometimes. And so I found these in different areas within different careers, whether it be, a timepiece, a car, different things like that. It helps a person to understand that, we can, again, like Dr. Martin Luther King, we can drop the PhD, we can be humans in front of each other. What is that thing in broadcasting that you had to maybe grab a hold of or have to be able to, connect at a different level and a human level?
That's a great question. I think when people hear sports broadcasters or broadcasters in general, the stereotype is that you hear the person with the deep voice and they talk like this, and it is totally announcery and all of that stuff. I think the biggest thing for me to grasp and connect with other people was to, every time I go on a show, every time I do a story, every time I'm live, every time I do social media, it's to talk to viewers as if they're my friends, as if that we are talking about it around over a couple of beers, or talking about sports, in our living rooms, is to try to transport myself there or them to me, in order to connect at a more personal level. I wouldn't say that I have the deepest broadcaster voice at all. I wouldn't say that I have the chiseled jawbone look that you would see on a broadcaster, maybe cast in a movie or TV. But what I do have is a personality that hopefully connects to a viewer in a way that they feel comfortable and they feel like I'm talking with them rather than talking at them. And so it took me a while to figure that out, because I came in thinking that, everybody has to be, Walter Cronkite there at the desk. But finding your own voice and finding that way your personality shines through on air takes some time. And by voice, I don't mean like physical voice. I mean like your overall style. I think that ultimately takes some time, and it takes you a couple times in a couple markets and a couple reps to be comfortable in front of the camera, being yourself. And so every time I step out there on the desk, every time I step out on here when I'm doing, our Titan show with Brad Hopkins, I'm looking at the camera as if it's one of my buddies. And that takes some time. And ultimately, I think I'm getting a better grasp on it now than I did, obviously, 10 years ago. And the hope is to continue to work on that, to where people keep inviting me into their homes on a nightly basis.
So when you go into scenarios, like I was at a convention, and I was in the professional beauty industry for years, and there was kind of rock stars that were on stage, right? And so we can think about that like the athletes. You go to the draft and there's the athletes there. But I remember being specifically at this convention in Vegas, and there's people on stage, and people are clamoring for him, all these things. Well, there's this guy walking in the hallway, very nondescript, has a kind of tan sports jacket on, cowboy hat, boots, just walking by himself. I saw him and I was like, oh my, it's him. And I run up and I'm like, how are you doing? Mr. Logan, it's good to see you. And we just start talking, and we start talking about cars. We don't talk about anything about business, anything like that, but we start talking about cars. He invites me over to his table. We sit down, we chat it up. Somebody comes up, but he's like, Kelly and I are having a conversation, and he just stays locked on me. And he tells me about, he's hugely passionate about cars, as far as like he found the car that his dad, like the actual car, the serial numbers, everything like that his dad owned years before. And then he tracked down the owner of it, bought it, restored it. And then he was showing it, and he was telling me all about it and where he went with the car shows and all these things. It had nothing to do with the profession that we were at as far as the convention. But for me, I was enamored by him. The guy's name is Gordon Logan. Gordon Logan started Sport Clips. Sport Clips started with a couple of people and now has over 1,800 locations and does over $1 billion in business a year. Everyone was clamoring for the dude who most likely didn't do any of that, but there was the fanfare. When you go into arenas like this, who is the Gordon Logan for you? Is it the athlete? Is it the other broadcaster? Is it the agent? Who is it for you?
That's a good question. I have kind of it's somewhat of a similar story. I was an intern at ABC7 out there in Los Angeles, and their experience is so different from when it comes to interns. Like you hear the word intern, right? It's like, oh, go get me a cup of coffee, right? You know what I mean? Or like go log this footage, or go take these notes, carry my equipment. That place, the interns do actual reporting. Like, so I would get sent out with a photographer to Laker games, Dodger games, Clippers games, Kings games, and be asked, hey, talk to these athletes after this game and bring back the footage, and we'll use it for our sportscast. And so there was a lot of responsibility on an intern, and I was interviewing people that I had no business talking to. Like at that point in my career, like I was still in college, like getting to talk to Kobe Bryant, right? And I was like, this is surreal. And so one of the assignments that I had was to go, I believe it was All-Star Weekend for MLB All-Star Weekend, and it was in Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium. And so there was, a lot of the pre-All-Star festivities at the stadium. And so they were like, hey, go down to Dodger Stadium and gather some content for us for the shows as we getting ready for All-Star Week. And I said, okay, great. So I'm there in the press box, and in the press box, it's all the media sitting there watching the event, and they're serving us food, and a lot of times media food, it's like a buffet style, and so you're kind of in potluck, and you're in line with the other media members, taking your turn at grabbing food. And of course, this is Dodger Stadium, and at the front of the line, I see Vin Scully, legendary Dodger broadcaster, right? And I freak out because he is the voice of, my childhood. When I think of sports broadcasting, not just in LA, but in baseball in general, he is the voice of a generation when it comes to sport. And so he's standing there in line, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to talk to him. I just don't know what the heck I'm going to say, right? I just don't want it to be word vomit. As an aspiring broadcaster, I cannot mess up my chance in front of the Vin Scully. And so I look at this. He's kind of a mythical figure, and I'm sure this is what you thought of when you saw Logan. Yeah. And it almost like when you see somebody like that, they don't look real, right? There's just like a certain glow around them because of just everything you've heard and how much they mean to you. And so he was in line, and there goes Vin Scully grabbing a bread bowl and putting chili in his bread bowl. And I said, oh my gosh, this guy eats chili just like the rest of us. And so that, I think that kind of eased my nerves a little bit, that he is, a very accomplished person, but he is a person nonetheless. And after that, he came around, and I stopped him, and I said, hey, Mr. Scully, like my name is Julian. I'm an aspiring sports broadcaster. You mean a lot to me. You're an inspiration to me. And I just wanted to let you know how much you inspire me to take on this career path. And, in typical Vin Scully fashion, his voice resonates with the entire room. And he's like, oh, Julian, nice to meet you. Great. Thank you for saying hello. Right. And so I said, okay, great. I said hello to Vin Scully. Awesome. After the event ends, all the media are clearing out of the press box. And Vin and I cross paths once again as he's heading to somewhere, and I'm heading out. And he stops me and says, hey, Julian, nice to meet you. Thank you for saying hello. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, that even after 9 innings, he still remembered my name. And he probably meets new people every single day by the hundreds, right, who want to talk to him. And I think when you talk about, a personal connection with somebody, and going into these arenas and trying to, whether to see are these athletes like larger than life? How can we connect on a personal level to them, to where we get, information that gets out to the fan bases who care about these organizations and these teams? For me, it started by watching Vin Scully eat some chili, because to me, after that, he was another person, you know, and the fact that he remembered my name at his age, no offense, through 9 innings of a baseball game, I don't know, meant the world to me. And so I think that's kind of the starting point of what I try to do when I connect with these athletes, these coaches, and these high profile sports figures, is I try to remember that moment right there.
So I've got the opportunity a couple of times to be able to go to a couple Super Bowl parties. One was in LA and then the other one was in Vegas. And if you get the opportunity, which you should go, is Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party. And
oh, wow.
If you want to go, we'll make sure that you go. Right. And so it's going to be in LA this year. So if you want to go, we'll make sure that you're there. But when I went, I was just talking with him, and he created a culture that it's wild because you're in the midst of some of the greatest. I mean, he's the greatest sports agent of all time, but you're in his midst, but you're also in the midst of all his friends who happen to be his clients, who are some of the biggest names in the history of sports. But all of them are super relaxed. And so what he told me was he created a culture of no autographs, no fanfare, things like that. But how do you, Julian, balance the fact of, I mean, when you're dealing with elite athletes, there's an ego involved. It's always there, right? I mean, that's the reason why they got to where and I'm not saying ego in a bad way. I mean, they had to think that they were the best because they have fierce competition. But how were you able to balance the fact of giving them the accolades without coming off as a fan? Because what I find this is the moment that a person turns into a fanboy or fangirl, the athlete or the personality draws back, as opposed to when you treat them like a friend. Like I was with my buddy, his name is John Paul, and he has a birthday every year, and he has some pretty strong people at his birthday, and there's probably about 45, 50 of us. Well, I walked out to the parking lot, and there was a guy sitting with a cowboy hat. Well, I'm not a big country fan at all, but I did, as I walk out, I said, hello, and I went to shake his hand, and he stood up, and he's like, "I'm Big Kenny," and I was like, "Oh, I'm Big Kelly." I didn't know who it was, and because I didn't, he actually became my friend, and he just talked to me, whereas I saw people coming up and wanting to take a picture, and he was almost like, "Yeah, I'll take a picture," and then he was done, and then he came back to have a conversation with me. How have you learned the balance of that, and how do you actually do it where a person feels lifted up because of what they did, respected, but also still like a person?
I think it goes to the relationship building portion of the job, right? For any insider, any person who is breaking information in the sports media world, you have to have obviously strong connections, right? And those connections and relationships build over time. I would hope that our friendship, Kelly, gets better in day 200 than it is right now, right? And so I think something that I've learned, particularly covering the Titans, is we get time in the locker room with these guys. It's basically called open locker room period, where we can go to each of their lockers and interview them on camera. However, I don't think what gets discussed is we as media could also just go around and chop it up with these guys off camera, right? And I can go up to, Peter Skoronsky's locker and just ask him, "Hey, how's your did you see the Northwestern game this past weekend?" Or I can go to Bryce Oliver's locker and talk about his kicks that he has on that day, right? I can talk about to Daryl Baker, who I had a pretty good relationship with, who was one of the Titans corners last year. Talk to him about his kid's first trip to Disney World, right? And I think doing that relationship building stuff isn't just us passing the time and being chummy as media members. There is a purpose to it, to connect to these athletes and show them that they are more than just people on a field to us, right? We want to connect with them on a personal level. So yes, they talk to us about the stuff on the field, but they also give us, maybe sometimes a personal anecdote will come out next time we interview them because of a relationship and a friendship that's been established. And for us as media members, it, as much as it looks like we're kissing their butt, it is actually genuine, because we look at these athletes with such wonder And another reason why we're in sports broadcasting is because we couldn't do it ourselves. We love sports, but we weren't gifted with the athletic ability to be there on the field every day. And so I think if you show genuine interest, genuine curiosity, with these players as if they are human beings just getting chili at the lunch table, then it'll ultimately lead to a better working relationship, even when they're their most mad in a game that they lost. I think that's something that's very important. I just saw Jeff Simmons, here in Music City, we have the CMA Fest, Country Music Festival, every single year, right? And I was invited to go to this country music party that's in my neighborhood here in Nashville. It was at a local business in town, and I think Jeff has some sort of endorsement deal with them or something like that. And he was there just hanging out as a member of the party. He was there grabbing some drinks. And I just went up to Jeff and just said hello. And how you doing? Great, good to see you. And I wanted to establish, like, hey, I know we're both here. I'm not here watching you as a member of the media. I'm here to see how you're doing and what you're up to as a friend that I would see at any other party where some friends are at. And so I think establishing that and having a connection, but also keeping certain things at arm's length it's a craft, and it takes some time to learn. But I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to not putting these athletes in the highest regard and thinking of them, I think, as these deity-like figures, but also connecting with them on a level to where you get those real personal anecdotes.
So my kids, 14 and 17, they always play this little game called Would You Rather? And whenever they pull this game out, it sucks because I know both the questions they're going to ask me suck. You know what I'm saying? They're going to give me two scenarios, and I'm like, I'm not going to. How about I choose none of them? They're like, that's not the game. You have to choose one.
How you play? Yeah.
Would you rather ask the wrong question or not ask the right one?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I think asking the wrong question is better than not asking at all. Because that is an opportunity for you as a media member who is relaying information to the public interest. It's a learning moment. It's a teaching moment, right? And you have to be okay as a media member being wrong about certain things, having thick skin towards certain things, sometimes an athlete erupting at you in a certain way. And you have to be okay to handle that and take it to the chin. And a lot of times, if it is genuine curiosity and if it's done in a genuine nature, you are going to get a lot of really good teaching moments from athletes who would maybe understand that you don't know anything. I don't know why Cam Ward continues to have some inaccurate practices. I'm not in his helmet. I'm not on the field, but asking a question that may be deemed wrong could give me some insight as the media member who is maybe a little bit uneducated when it comes to being an NFL quarterback, because I've never been an NFL quarterback. So I always feel better after a press conferences. And for those who don't know, a lot of these press conferences, it's not something I had to get used to here in Nashville in covering the Titans in an NFL team is we don't get the mic to ask the questions and we take turns passing it around. We are yelling over each other. And sometimes egos get hurt in that battle, right? And so I feel much better about myself after a press conference if I've asked one or two questions, even if they are deemed as the wrong question, or even if they are deemed as, why the heck did he ask that? As opposed to me leaving a press conference, not having the courage to ask a question and be maybe using it as a learning tool down the line. And so to answer your question, absolutely, asking the question is better than not asking a question.
So what was a learning moment for you? Like, I'm going to expose mine so you could expose
Okay.
yours. I was doing a speaking engagement for the hospitality industry. It was going really well. Probably, I mean, it was amazing. Some of the top owners, Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, the whole nine. I happened, this sucks that I'm saying, I haven't said it in front of anyone. The convention was in Florida. So I want you to understand, like it kind of sets the scene. There was an individual in the crowd that had a resemblance to a guy who was a high profile and not a very savory character from Florida. You probably know who I'm talking about, and was in the, and the guy looked like him. And I waited the whole weekend to find the opportunity, and it arose. It was like a softball. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you know, when they throw up, like, and you're thinking, I could take it. And I took it.
Eyes light up. Mm-hmm.
I took it, and I made the comparison, and the room lit up and laughed. But there was one woman who was so mad. And I was like, oh my, and it just caused this like cloud over the course of like 3 days that were so incredible. All these relationships, all these things. It was one joke that I said, and I tell you, it landed for every single person except one person. But I learned that words have power. I learned that if you're in Florida, you don't make that joke. I learned that you wait a little bit. It was a little bit too soon to make the comparison. And so I learned from it. What was one question that you asked that you immediately wanted to suck it back in, or that you just got your butt handed to you, whether it been early on in your career or, in present time?
Let me think. That's a good question. I have two. One was when I was interning at ABC7. We were sent to Irvine, California. I believe it was Irvine, California, the training facility for the U.S. women's soccer team ahead of the World Cup. And that's when the United States had Alex Morgan and Hope Solo and that group of really talented soccer players, right? And I was paired with a photographer, and he was like, "You're doing the interviews today. You're going to get to interview Hope Solo today, right?" And me being naive and maybe not doing as much research as a college kid, a defiant college kid, thought he needed to do, went over to ask Hope Solo, "What do you think about the fact that maybe your group's not the toughest group to get out of for the United States?" Meanwhile, it was deemed the group of death when the first pairings came out. And so Hope Solo looks at me and pauses. And at that point, I'm a college student, so I'm terrified of what's going to happen, because I know when an athlete kind of pauses and looks, it's kind of, here comes something, right? And Hope goes, "Well, I have no idea what you're talking about, because people are calling our group the group of death. So I don't know where you got that from." And, and as a college kid, obviously it's a gut punch, right? As somebody who wants to get in the business and is getting the chance to interview these high profile athletes. And, at that point, the learning lesson was double and triple check your research, right? I think now, first of all, if that happened now, the question wouldn't even be posed that way, because I would actually, do the more legwork on a certain story. But the criticism or the snarky kind of response wouldn't hurt as much these days, because I have learned from moments like that throughout my career. One that happened more recently was in Spokane, Washington, and I covered Washington State football. And Washington State football is where Cam Ward went to Washington State, and I covered Cam while he was over there as well. They suffered a really bad loss to Utah, who was like Pac-12 champs. They were the team everybody was chasing there in the most recent iteration of the Pac-12 before it all broke up. And their head coach, Jake Dickert, and I have a really good relationship. And in the postgame, after the loss, I say, "Well, that Utah team, coach, is one of they're the cash cow of the conference right now. they are the team that everybody is chasing. Is this loss a litmus test of where your program is at? And for a college coach who puts his heart and soul into every single day to help this program get better, a program that had a long way to climb, I might add, I could see why that question would be taken a certain type of way. And so before I could even finish that question, he interrupted me and he said, no, it doesn't, and was very stern in his response. He could have made it worse than it actually was. And he and I still have a good relationship to this day. I just talked to him last year. I think, could the question have been posed maybe a little bit differently? Absolutely. But sometimes also hard questions do need to be asked. And as much as, athletes love and coaches love when we as broadcasters praise, I think also the handling of fair criticism is, I think as a whole, needs to be handled better. I think a little bit in the social media age. I think, you can't take the positive and also deflect the negative when it comes to athletes and also broadcasters as well. And so those were two learning lessons from questions that I got a little bit chewed out for by those subjects there.
Do they immediately go to the tape for you? Like when because you guys are you guys doing your Titans, you and Brad, are you guys doing every day, or how many times a week are you guys doing?
We do like twice a week right now.
Okay. When you guys get done, are they reviewing tape and looking at different things? I mean, is that what they do in TV?
Absolutely. Yeah. We whether it's TV or our shows, they're all posted somewhere, right? They're all in the archive somewhere. And so managers will constantly look at our work and our on-air performance. For example, the show that I have with Brad, I'll have a quarterly call with the producers and the talent evaluators of the show to check in on how it's going, where it needs to improve. It's very much like athlete tape, right? Like, hey, this is where this went wrong here. This is where it could be better. And that's the beauty of this profession, is that there's always constantly tape that you can watch back and listen to yourself or watch yourself in order to improve. So we do that constantly.
Carrot, cut, and clarity are the standards in diamonds, right? So actually, Panther Diamonds is one of the sponsors of our show. And when someone's setting up a diamond, it's carrot, cut, clarity. When you're looking at TV broadcasting, what are those three or five or whatever it is that are the standards that they're able to look up at that template and say, we need to improve in this, we need to improve in this, we need to improve in that?
Big picture. I think something at least that, and it goes back to a little bit to what we just talked about, is I think criticism is important, but I think it needs to be fair. I think that I would never say something on air or on a podcast that I couldn't say to an athlete, to them, and have a conversation about, right? I think there is a way to point out where things went wrong in a specific game or with a specific play in a respectful way, to where you're not trashing the athlete, because you couldn't obviously do it yourself, but you could, but there is a way to do it that's fair, and you better have your reasons why you deem it fair, because if that athlete calls you out on it, you better be prepared to talk about it. And so that is, if you've listened to the show or watched me on Channel 2 in Nashville, you would know that, a lot of the takes that I have would be carefully crafted and carefully said in case one of those athletes are listening. I think as a sports media as a whole, we need to do a better job of that. I think we are in such a hot take era right now where, certain networks, and I'm not going to say which ones, are paying maybe 2 or 3 people to have hot takes instead of having a deeper team of maybe more profound and fair journalists. And they are doing it for what is on social media and the digital age right now, and what gets clicks and engagement is more important than I think in viewership. And that is another way that, the digital age is in social media is changing the industry. But we don't have to be like that at the local level. And so that's where I think that one area we need to change is, if you're going to criticize, make it fair and don't make it personal. And so that's number one. The other thing I think is emotional storytelling. I think could always improve. I don't think that we are at a point yet where that kind of aspect is dying. I think that's keeping local sports broadcasting alive. And so emotional storytelling on the athletes that don't normally get that kind of love, I think that's a way that we could certainly improve in that. And then, another thing is, I think preparation and research. I think in the day of social media and the day and age where everything, you could find it on Google or AI and things of that nature, it is easy to get lazy and stop reading and stop writing. And I think that if you do that kind of stuff, you're kind of cheating the craft a little bit. I think the research and preparation portion of the job kind of gets lost in a younger generation of broadcaster. And I hope that it doesn't die. And I do think that we need to do a better job at that kind of front too. I'm maybe a little bit of an older soul when it comes to that stuff. If I have, like, for example, I'm working on a story right now on the top golf course in Tennessee, right? And I just visited the golf course last week, and it is a heaven on earth type of place, right? Even if you're not a golf fan. I am writing the story in my head, not only as the story is being conducted and I'm there. I'm writing the story in my head prior to getting there, and I'm writing the story on the way home. I'm thinking about how the story is going to go in my head, while I'm here at home or I'm in the shower. And if I have an idea, for example, a line that I really like, I'll hop out of the shower, write it on my notes app, and hop back in. And I think that level. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's got to do that. That's a little bit of a sicko kind of thing, but that level of preparation and the appreciation for reading, writing, so you can come up with valid, not just stories, but opinions and fair criticisms of athletes and coaches, I think is very, very crucial in today's age of broadcasting.
Mr. Mike Bender has he has a dog named Bella. And Mike Bender has a friend that he's had for over 28 years. He met him for the first time after the guy had been in prison for 11 years. And Mike was a police officer in Simi Valley. Well, he found some parts of the case that he didn't think that were that savory. So he started to investigate. He took on that case for 28 years pro bono. And he ended up getting the guy 100% exonerated after 39 years in prison, wrongly convicted of a double murder. Now those two, after he got out, he was in jail, he was in prison longer than Nelson Mandela. Now they're best friends. Mike Bender has a dog named Bella that I see every single morning. And when I walk my dog, I walk him kind of in the same area, and I workshop ideas with Mike Bender. So when we're walking, he's got Bella, I got Skylar and Ziggy. We're walking, and he says, "How's your morning?" I say, "How's your morning?" We go back and forth, and then I'll workshop an idea, and I'll see if I can get the idea out, like the beginning, the meat, and the end, in a fashion that will be quick enough, but be impactful enough to be able to then broadcast on the podcast later, like once I take my dogs home and then I head over to the studio. Who's your Mike Bender?
Ooh, that is a good question. Well, professionally, at least right now, I work with a guy by the name of Kelly Cardenas, who has been a longtime sports broadcaster. He's the longest tenured sports broadcaster here in Nashville. And part of the attraction in coming to Nashville was, of course, to cover the Titans and the pro sports that we have here, to go to a vibrant city that's growing, and it's awesome. There's always something happening here. But it was also the personnel that work at my station. And he is the first person that I've worked directly with in all the sports teams in the 4 different stations that I've been at, who has the pelts on the wall, as in multiple Emmys. He's got the experience and has seen and done everything you could possibly do in this market, and comes from a similar background of cutting your teeth through different small markets like I have. And so I was excited to come here because I've never had that. A lot of my peers to this point were of similar age and experience. And so when that's the case, you grow and you get better almost through like in-team competition in a way. Like if my coworker who I work with, who's the other sports broadcaster, we're kind of the same age and we're similar experience, and he puts out a good story, awesome. I want to put out an even better story, and we'll have kind of almost within team competition that way. I am never going to have the same level of experience at the same time as my sports director, Corey Curtis, now. But what I can get is his valuable experience from everything that he's done in his career. And it helps the on-air product, at least for my side of things, be that much better. So he's taught me to get ideas out quicker on air. He's taught me when it comes to storytelling. He doesn't pull punches, and nor do I want him to when it comes to criticizing work or me getting better. He's taught me to have a thicker skin. And a lot of the stuff that we learned or that we talked about on this podcast when it comes to being in the locker room with the Titans and reasons for chopping it up with them, that comes from learning from somebody like that. And I can point to a number of different ones, but at least right now, he's probably the most professional of that. The personal side of things, my dad is a criminal defense attorney out in Southern California, and he's been so for longer than I've been alive. And as you know, as knowing lawyers yourself, they read and write with the best of them. Like like that level of research and writing and not cutting corners is unbelievable, because most times somebody's livelihood is in their hands, right? And so, I mean, I'm not afraid to say, in the sense that I've had my dad look over past story scripts and be like, does this connect with you? Does this connect with somebody who is a sports fan, who also is a human being who wants to connect with really good storytelling in sports? And so he is somebody that I look to constantly, as far as not just a personal voice of reason, but somebody that I admire for the way that he prepares and doesn't cheat his craft. And so if I cheat mine, how disappointed would he be? That's kind of what I ask myself. And so that's somebody who certainly brings the best out of me.
I just got the opportunity to speak at Seagullville Federal Correctional Institution, the FCI there. And I'll only go and speak to the staff if I get to speak to the inmates. That's my agreement with the executives. And so I got to speak with the staff. It was great. I got to speak with the inmates. But the way that I started it was I told them all that all of us in this room got to the place where we are because of our words, and words have power. And if we understand that words are the words that come out of our mouth are an overflow of our heart. So our heart overflows, it fills up our mind, it gets us to think about something, then it causes us to speak about it. Once we speak about it, our feet move to a place that is in connection with what we're talking about, and then our hands create actions in that space where we're standing that end up having outcomes. And so what I was talking with them about is the fact that my job is to go and speak. My words, I get paid to speak in places. So my words got me here. Your words got you here too. And so changing your words can change the place where you stand, and can ultimately change the way that your hands move and the actions that you create within it. The power of words, When did you start to understand, like, was it from a kid? When did you start to understand the power that you have in the words that you say? And I want you to relate this, or if you can, to a teleprompter, because you're having to work with them at times. I'm sure that there's times where you're not working with one. But I had a challenge early on where when I was looking at the teleprompter or I was looking at the script, I was renting the words and not owning them, and there's a difference. Yeah? How were you able to get to a point where you understood the power of the words and then you owned them? Because hearing you, I want you to understand this whole entire interview, this whole entire time while I'm spending with you, I'm so inspired by you because your inflection, your body position, everything about it is unbelievable. Like, it's an inspiration to me. And so, when I said the Gordon that walks through, like, I wanted to spend time with you from a selfish reason because you're an incredible human, and you're a gangster at what it is that you do. So back to that, when did you understand the power of the words, and how can a person own their words as opposed to renting them?
When I was younger, like I mentioned earlier, I played basketball all my life growing up. And
do you still have game?
Oh, absolutely. We play twice a week at the McEwen Community Center, man. I'm an all-star over there.
Is there anyone on the Titans right now that you could take one-on-one and in a game to 5 and beat?
I mean, my guess would probably be, just for the lack thereof size, and no offense to Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears. I don't know if they played basketball in high school. I assume they did, but I think I would have a better chance against those guys than having to stop like J.C. Latham in the post. You know what I mean?
So we could set up a charity 1-on-1, 2-5, and we could get charities to donate. And they would donate not just to the charity, but they would donate based off of, they would choose you, or they would choose Tajay, or they would choose Tony Pollard. I think that I
like that idea.
This game needs to happen. And you know what's going to happen? Can I do the play-by-play? I want to do the play-by-play. I want to be off to the side, the Chick Hearn, you know what I'm saying? Like, going at it and commentating while you play against Tony Pollard. Okay, so Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, which one do you mop up and which one is a close game?
Ooh, man. I don't know. I might get in trouble saying this, because the next time I'm in the locker room, if they hear this is going to be trouble for me. Tajay's a little bit younger, so he might have a little bit more younger legs and athleticism. Tony's got some miles on him. I might need to change my answer too. I mean, like, I might be quicker laterally than obviously a lot of the linemen are. So if I could, play from the perimeter a little bit, as long as they don't get ball first, I might have a chance with those guys too.
Could you beat Brad? Could you get Brad? Could you take Brad?
Oh man, that's tough, because you see pictures of Brad when he was a player. Obviously, he's a big individual, but he is cut now, man.
He's Adonis. He looks like Adonis.
He looks like he can still play. There was he posted like a gym progress photo on his Instagram story, and when I saw him for that show afterwards, I said, "Dude, my girl is on this app. Chill, man." Like, muscle show.
Okay, but you got to choose one. It's like my kids. Would you rather? Who were you mopping up, and who's a close game? Tajay and Tony Pollard. And then, are you willing to take the game against you and Brad, and we'll donate to charity and make it a good cause?
Yeah, I think Tajay will be a closer game. I need to look at their backgrounds more to see if one of them was an all-state high school basketball player or something. And I'm just going off of what I know of them as players now, because Tajay's a jitterbug, man. Like, he is side-to-side movement, just pure athleticism. That would be a much closer game. I'm saying probably I'd have an easier time with Tony, only because he might not even want to do it to begin with. And then, yes, I would openly welcome a one-on-one with Brad Hopkins. That would be awesome.
Okay, what about in a 3-point contest? 3-point contest. Who on the Titans is beating you?
Oh, well, from what I understand, Bryce Oliver could hoop. They have a sidebar. They have a little basketball hoop in the Titans locker room that they all just kind of play Pop-A-Shot on. And Bryce's locker, at least for the last few years, I don't know where it's at now because they've moved locker spots, was right there next to the basketball hoop. And there was one conversation, I think, I don't remember who was shooting on the hoop, and he was saying like, oh, I'm the best basketball player in the team. And Bryce chimes in and says, no, I'm the best basketball player in the team, like without a doubt. And so just from that I'm going off just from that conversation alone, that wide receiver Bryce Oliver, not only does he have the physique of a basketball player, like I think, what is he, like 6'5", something like that?
Yeah.
But I've seen him moss people at practice. And so I'd probably say Bryce is the guy that you do not want to face that's a Titans player right now.
I'm calling the shot too. I believe, and let's keep this stat, I believe that I can mop up 75% of the Titans on the bowling alley.
Okay. All right.
So
you're a regular Pete Weber, huh?
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm on the PBA tour, but I'm saying like when I remember first starting my career and I didn't have. Do you understand what gravitating towards your swag means?
Yeah.
So when you're not good at one thing, you just gravitate towards something that you are good at in your mind, and then your confidence moves into that place. Well, when I started in my profession, I sucked at what I was doing. I was horrible. I had no experience. I hadn't done the reps. I was bad. But I would gravitate towards my swag, which would, every person that I would come in contact with, I'd be like, I will whoop you in bowling. And it kept my mind and that confidence moving. But I think 75% of the Titans would get mopped up on the bowling alley. Right here.
Hey, and yeah, I assume you have your own bowling ball?
Yes, I do. I have my own bowling ball. You know where I got the bowling ball? This is sports trivia, and I'm hoping you're going to go deep. You go deep. You go deep with sports, and I know in Grand Junction you had to figure out like what was it, like hog racing and different things like that. Like, so get this: the first U.S. Open in bowling that a woman beat a man. She beat him by 45 or 55 pins, I believe. Her name was Kelly Kulick. Kelly Kulick, I saw her on TV. It was during the playoffs. Brett Favre was playing. My wife's a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre. And Green Bay Packers are playing. It's halftime. I switch over to the PBA tour, and everyone's like, why are we watching this? But Kelly Kulick is there. She's going, and she smashes this dude. Well, I look and I realize that it's in Las Vegas, and one of my buddies works at the casino where she's actually bowling. I call him, say I want to meet her. He sets it up. I end up getting to meet Kelly Kulick. And this was one of those moments where nobody else was trying to meet her at the time, right? So it wasn't this huge star. But I got a chance to meet her, connected with her, awesome woman. She gave me the ball that she won the tournament with. I have it still. And then she sent me her new signature bowling ball. And no one cares about this, Julian, including by your expression yourself, except for the dirty bowling alley in Oceanside that I mentioned her name, and all the people that work there with one tooth, the people that get to walk down the alleys, they all stopped and were like, oh my gosh, he knows Kelly Kulick. And I was like the guy for one day in my life at the Oceanside surf bowl. Everyone thought that I was the coolest because of that ball.
That is awesome. I mean, that is like, it's the equivalent of getting a home run bat from somebody to me, or getting that milestone home run ball, just a different sport. I mean, I can't bowl a 300. I can barely bowl a 200. So, to get a game used memorabilia, it is awesome. And I have a newfound appreciation for that. One of the stories I did last year, there's a professor who works for Austin P University in Clarksville, about an hour away here from Nashville. And he is the play-by-play broadcaster, or former play-by-play broadcaster, for the Washington Nationals baseball team. He was the radio broadcaster when they won the World Series in 2019. But he's a teacher now, and he teaches his classes through baseball memorabilia that he's collected over the years. Because his idea is, like, if you could talk about baseball, you could talk about anything. And so I went to his home and did a story in his basement of all the memorabilia like you can even possibly imagine. There's a Brooklyn Dodgers hat from Jackie Robinson's teams. There is Nolan Ryan worn jerseys. He's got the World Series ring. And obviously he didn't give me any of the memorabilia. It's his. But just holding it was like, this is a piece of history right here where greatness was used. Same thing for the bowling ball that was used in a high-profile PBA event.
This is what my pops would say. He would always say, "It's not the arrow, it's the Indian." And although he would probably get in trouble today in saying that, but I'm saying it.
I get what you mean.
But he said it because I said I was playing pool and I got whooped, and I came home and I said, "Dad, I need to get my own pool stick." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I got whooped." He's like, yeah, but why do you need your own pool stick? I said, "Because all the guys at my brother's fraternity had their own pool stick. That's why they won." He said, "No, son, it's not the arrow, it's the Indian." In broadcasting, what is the thing that most broadcasters think that they need, but they don't realize it's not that, it's the way in which you use it?
A photographer. I think years ago, before my time in broadcasting, before I got here to Nashville, you get to a place like Nashville, anywhere you're going, whether it be to cover the Titans or Nashville SC or the Predators or Vanderbilt, you are probably getting a photographer to set up your live shots, where you as the talent just have to show up and be talent and have some on-air charisma. In today's age of local news, in today's age of the mobile journalist, we are all what we call one-man bands or one-woman bands, to where I shoot, write, edit, present all my own stuff. So I think there's a misconstruction that, I'm just showing up and talking about the Titans on TV for 2 or 3 minutes, and I have all these resources at my disposal. That's not the case. I'm going to practice in the morning with a camera. I'm shooting the Titans practice in the angle I want. I'm shooting the press conferences. I'm asking the questions. Then I'm writing my script. Then I'm hustling back to the station, editing the video that will ultimately go on air, and then posting to web and social media. And I think a lot of journalists these days particularly don't want to do that because it is more difficult. It is more work. It is a hassle to lug around 50 pounds of equipment at a story in the heat, even if you're on a football field with a pro team. It is the humbling, non-glamorous portion of the job that doesn't get talked about a lot. But the way I look at it, and I've looked at it over the years, is would it be awesome to have a photographer to where I could just show up and be talent? Great. But the fact that I don't makes me have to be that much better and that much more creative. And ultimately, then when I get that work on air, I am that much more proud of it because I had to do everything for it. And so I don't know how long my back will agree with it, because I am carrying a camera like this and it is heavy on the shoulders. Or if I'm sitting at a Vanderbilt game on the basketball sideline, I am crisscross applesauce with a 50-pound camera, and it's not great for the lower extremities. But I think the fact that I have done it, and a lot of maybe broadcasters shy away from it or don't want to do that, I just say, well, you have to be that much more creative if you want your stuff to be better, being a one-man or one-woman band.
I remember asking my pops, "Did you fight in high school?" And, because as a son, you want to know these things about your dad. And he he turned to me and he just looked at me and he's like, "It wasn't much of a fight." And I was like, he's trying to be the man, whatever it was. And he said, no, son, you don't understand. I lived in a one-bedroom cabin. I had 6 siblings. We didn't have hot running water. We didn't even have a TV. So when most kids at my age were watching TV or hanging out with their buddies, I was chopping wood. So by the time I got to school and someone had a problem, it wasn't really a problem, and it ended very quickly. For you preparing for this type of, the resilience that you have, the things that you're doing, what was your chopping wood early on as a kid to get you ready for the type of things that you're doing now?
So as I mentioned at the top, I grew up in Long Beach, California, and playing basketball growing up, particularly in the inner city of Long Beach, you have to have very thick skin. I played for an AAU basketball program at Lakewood, California, which is right next to Long Beach, for those who don't know, and it called Lakewood Hoops. The head coach of that program was a tough MFer, man. I mean, like he is one of those coaches like Coach Carter style, the Samuel L. Jackson. If you've ever seen that movie, where you do something wrong, it's 1,000 suicides, 500 push-ups, and we're doing laps around a sketchy park where people have pit bulls and maybe not the best kind of people are hanging out around there. I mean, it was the hood. I am not going to sugarcoat it. That's what it was. And so as someone whose family dynamic wasn't necessarily like that, being thrust into that in the area of which you live, it forces you to have thicker skin. It forces you to wipe off those tears and put some elbow grease into it and fight. It forces you to have to earn everything. It forces you to knock yourself down and get back up, to be tough. And that is something that not only Coach ACD, as is his name, taught me, but playing with basketball with those types of kids kind of taught me as well, that everything that is earned and not given. And so that was kind of the chopping wood moment. I mean, my parents could probably tell you the crazy type of practices that we had, not to necessarily get better at basketball as much as it was to get better as mentally strong and willpower of human beings. We were in 110 degree heat running around a blacktop for hours on end, no water breaks. You know what I mean? Like real Coach Carter type of stuff. And I think, you learn a lot, I think, through sport. There are a lot of life lessons you can learn through that. And so when I think of an athlete maybe being snarky with me, right? Or when I think of, hey, I'm running into dead ends on this story, how can I make something out of it, right? What avenues can I go in? And it feels like I want to, give up and kill the story. I think back to those moments on the blacktop out in Long Beach, and I say, well, if I did that, why am I complaining about these little trivial things, And that goes not just with the job, that goes with everyday life too, the stresses that everyday life brings. And that was certainly the chopping wood moment is the mental toughness that I learned from those days on the blacktop.
When I drive to Utah, it's about 12 hours. 13 hours. I try and do it quicker. I try and be like Clark W. Griswold and set a record every single time when I go. But I always break it up into if it does take me 12 hours, I get to listen to Rogan 4 times because he does 3-hour podcasts. At first, I was like, man, it works for him because he's Joe Rogan. But then I remember him having a conversation, and it was like, whether this is not about political affiliation or anything like that, but he was talking about during the presidential race, and Trump went on and Kamala didn't, and he talked about the reason why he did what he did, and the length of time, and it was he generally did anywhere from 2 hours and 45 minutes to over 3 hours, because he said that a person couldn't keep a front up for longer than an hour. And once you get past that, you actually start to have this conversation where you're just having a conversation and no one's presenting anymore because they can't keep their guard up for that long. And he was talking about that. And when with Kamala's people, they wouldn't allow her to be on the podcast for that long, and they wanted it in her arena. And he said, no, you can only come here. And he was completely fine with it. Well, again, it wasn't about the political side for me. It was just about the craft, because I love this craft. This craft is like the greatest thing in the world. But we live in a society of sound bites, like you were alluding to earlier, where people get paid for a hot take. They get paid for getting pissed off. Like, we call, some people call him Stephen A. We call him Screamin' A. Me and my buddies. And Screamin' A had a soundbite, and I know he did it just for this. He talked about that, how are the Lakers going to win with an all-white starting lineup? And he said it, and he was like, I'm going to get canceled for this, and he went. And I was like, you're only saying that to get the clicks, because you know that people are going to go right to the comments, which I did, and then they're going to be blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
In a world of those type of hot takes, in a world of the soundbite kind of things, you seem like a person who is continually creating relationships, but relationships take time. Relationships take barriers that get broken down, and it can't be in a short amount of time most of the time. How can you play in both arenas? And especially, like, say you cover a game and you're interviewing a person after the game, you don't have time to break their walls down. Although as a viewer, I don't want to hear you ask the exact same question and them give the exact same answer. Oh yeah, perseverance, great teamwork. I'm gonna, we got to focus on the intangibles and have a great game. That generally is the answer. And the questions, the questions that come. How do you balance those things?
I think it comes down to, that is just the first of all, to answer the hot take thing, like, that is just not who I am personality wise. And to me, I would be doing myself a disservice if I took a short route and try to do things off hot takes. It's just not who I am. There are a lot of people who are really good at it. And if that's what they are, behind the scenes, that's who they are. But it would feel like a disservice to the years that I have put in if I don't want to say sold out, right? But doing things for the simple fact of shock value, I am okay with the long play, because ultimately life is about relationships. The people who are going to be at, my wedding one day, or my funeral, hopefully way, way, way down in the future, are the people that I've built these long-term relationships with over time, right? And that's the way I kind of look at broadcasting, in the sense that the answers that I get from Jeffrey Simmons after a game when I first got here may not be as good as they are 2 or 3 years after the fact in the locker room, and becoming a familiar face and saying hello to him at certain events, or chopping it up with him at his locker room when there is downtime. I am okay with the long play, because to me, that is the most rewarding. And there are times where maybe you have to get the coach speak answer until you develop those relationships after a while. I do think, there are ways to connect with athletes in a quick amount of time for, immediate sound bites and immediate content and things of that nature. For example, I did a sit down with Robert Saleh when he was first hired, and everybody was going to be asking him those same questions, right? What is it like to be the Titans coach? Did you ever think you get another chance after the Jets? How do you feel about Cam Ward? I knew all those questions were going to be asked. So I said, let's take a more creative, different approach. I found pictures of him when he was in high school and college playing football as a tight end. And and instead of asking him how does it feel to be the Titans coach, I just gave him a picture and I said, tell me this story right here. Right. And so there is a there is a way that you could do it in the immediate that certainly opens up the athlete for later down the line. But I am perfectly okay with having the slow play relationships, because I think those are the most meaningful in this life.
Who's the unsung hero right now on the Titans that isn't going to maybe get interviewed this year, but has a story that has really touched your heart?
Ooh, that is a very good question. Let me think about that for a second. Player on the Titans, unsung hero. Oof. I gotta say, Kelly, you stumped me on that one. You know, I think we're gonna see a lot more, obviously, as we get through training camp, and a lot of these players who maybe are trying to make their team and fight for a final roster spot. But one person that I could say that Titans fans who have been clamoring for it for the last year and may finally get their wish is Xavier Restrepo. Xavier Restrepo, for those who don't know, it was a very popular wide receiver coming into the team last year. He was an undrafted free agent who was a fan favorite because he had a previous relationship from playing with Cam Ward in Miami. He was Cam Ward's top target in Miami. Now, when you see Xavier Restrepo just walking around town, you wouldn't necessarily think football player, right? I think the guy is probably 5'7", isn't the quickest guy in the world, has to work extremely hard, it seems, for anything that he gets. But he's still a part of this roster and has probably been the most impressive outside of Carnell Tate wide receiver in mini camp and OTAs so far. And, you know, a lot of people, even myself included, I will admit that I said, this guy's probably not making the roster. He's short, he's slow, and the roster is even better this year than it was last year. And last year he was a practice squad player. But I think he put a lot of people on notice during camp, at least the ones that were watching him. And I think from a inspiration perspective, the fact that he is even making it a conversation, whether he makes the team or not, I think is worthy of some praise, because, you know, we all can connect with the person who isn't tall enough, the person who isn't the strongest, the person who isn't the quickest, but somehow they find a way. In America, we love the underdog story, right? Like, Rudy is one of my favorite movies for that very simple reason. And so he, in a lot of ways, embodies the kind of player that the Titans need more of in their organization, and embodies kind of the attitude that I think the front office wants, because he is not going to take no for an answer. He's the kind of guy that you're going to have to drag off that field if he's not going to make the team. And so I think there's a good shot that he makes the squad, and Cam likes him, and it could be somebody that Titans fans will then tell the media, I told you so, because a lot of us wrote the guy off.
My pops, I don't know if your dad did. Your dad is a very intelligent guy, being in the profession that he's at. You were talking about how he reads and writes at a, amazing level. I don't know if he did have this, but my pops would always have like 3 or 4 sayings that he would say all the time, and he would sometimes say them at inopportune times, and I wouldn't think that they would relate until I got to a point where I realized that he actually knew what he was talking about. And I would get sick of him saying these things. But one of the things that he would say was, you never know where someone's from. You never know where they're going. You never know where you'll meet up with them again. So make a friend out of everyone, right? And I remember him telling me that, or just a practice that he would do was, if somebody complimented him on something, he literally, if it was a shirt, if it was a watch, whatever it was, he would just take it off and give it to the person. And I watched him do this throughout my life. Well, I didn't realize that I had taken it on until I got a chance. I was speaking in front of a crowd, and a woman in the front row said, I like your necklace. I instinctively just took it off and gave it to her. I did. I moved on. I was actually in Nashville later on. This was a couple of years ago. It's probably 25 years later. I got hired into that same company, to their, what's called their national huddle. And I was going to speak. It was about 3,500 that I was speaking in front of. And right before I walked in, John and Jamie Robinson, the general manager of the Titans at the time, they show up, and we're going to take them to their seats. And the lady who is the executive, she's a top-level executive, number one in the whole company, right before she takes them to their seat, she turns around to me and she says, "Thank you for that necklace." And I was like, "What?" And it clicked, and I remembered 25 years ago, I had given that woman a necklace, which I didn't know that she was the number one employee in that whole entire company, and she's the person that hired me in to be able to do that speaking engagement 25 years later. When's a time in your life that type of scenario has come into fruition, or has it yet?
I think it has come in maybe not in a 25 years down the line way, but as I mentioned before, one of my mentors, Brian Formica, who we talked about earlier, is a huge reason why I'm even here in Nashville and continuing this crazy career in the first place, and give me tools in the tool belt to grow and ultimately down the line. And his number one thing for me in giving advice, because he could have charged me for the advice that he was giving me. It was that valuable, right? Especially to an uneducated, unencumbered broadcaster at the time. One thing he said that, "Hey, I don't ask for money. I'm not asking for any, special treatment or praise. I just want you to pay it forward to the next person." Right? So you are ultimately going to get an email or a phone call or a DM from an aspiring broadcaster who is up late down a rabbit hole on YouTube looking at your stuff, and you are going to have a decision to make to either respond to them the same way I did to you, or ignore it and go on with your life. And just remember where you were while you were in their shoes during that time. And sure enough, after 4 or 5 years in the business, probably around the time when I got to my end of my time in Eugene and the beginning of my time in Spokane, and I started to create a little bit more of a social media following, my work was out there. Sure enough, there it came. Like the sun rises and the sun sets. It was a certainty. And I have received multiple emails and DMs from people in this business asking for help, asking for advice, to look at their work, to give them tips. Maybe they feel lost and they want some sort of direction, that this is the career path that they want. Maybe it's just, an extra boost of confidence that they need to continue going in a very cutthroat profession. And I have answered every single one of them. And, I'm not looking for them to continue to come back to me if they want to. It's their career. It's their life. They don't have to take my word as gospel. They could take all of it, none of it, a little bit of it. That's fine. I'm not asking for that. But for me, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for people, good people in this industry, helping the next generation. And it is a very ego-driven business. It is a very unforgiving business. Like I put it the best way, like we work 10 to 12 hours a day and grind, like I mentioned, being a one-man band, all to get on TV for 1 or 2 minutes. The juice doesn't sound like it's worth the squeeze, right? And so the more people that we can funnel out of the business that are doing it for the wrong reasons, the more people you do that by having more people who are in it, who are paying forward to the next generation. And so even if I talk to these aspiring broadcasters or people who are messaging me one time, the goal isn't necessarily just to, okay, I'll answer you, get off, let's not talk again. It's to continue to pay it forward, because I know that's what people have done for me. And so I will give my time to those broadcasters who reach out, because I know there are a lot of people in this industry who won't.
Growing up, we used to go to the fair. Did you have a fair in your town?
Yes, sir.
So, but when we would go, my mom would only give us $3 a piece. I had two brothers. We all get $3. My two brothers.
That doesn't even give you a fried Twinkie anymore.
That's what I'm saying, man. It doesn't even get you in the place, right? You actually at this time there wasn't admission to the fair. The admission to the fair is weird to me now. They should just let you come to the fair. Mm-hmm. But we would get $3. My two older brothers, they were pretty frugal. One of them would spend like $1 and save the other $2. The other one would maybe spend $2 and save $1. I would run right to the games, and I would play the games, and I would always lose because with $3, you always lose. And I remember making a thought process and a commitment to myself that I want to be successful in life. I want to make a ton of money, and I didn't link success to money, but I was saying I want to be successful. I want to make a ton of money only so I could go to the fair and play until I win. That was the only reason why. So when I went into business, it wasn't some like I'm going to change the world. I want to fix world hunger or create world peace. I simply wanted to make enough money to be able to go to the fair and play until I won. And I got to that point, and I remember now my wife doesn't like me going to the fair because literally I play until I win. And sometimes those things don't have to be they don't have to be world changing. They just have to be kind of signature to who you are, right? And so when I started off with the podcast, I remember I told my wife, I turned to her, we were watching David Letterman's My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, and I turned to her and I said, I want to do that. And she's like, what? And I told her, I said, that's what I want to do. And she's like, yeah, whatever, let's just watch the show. So this whole time while I've been building all the stuff, it's because I wanted to be able to sit down and have the type of conversation that I saw with a Letterman, right? I wanted to take a bit of comedy from Fallon. I wanted to take the heart of Oprah, but I wanted to take the intellect of a David Letterman. And if you watch that show, for me, it's that's the grail, right? What's that little silly thing that's so signature to Julian that maybe doesn't make any sense to the world on why you're doing this?
One of my favorite broadcasters' name is Tom Rinaldi. For those who don't know who Tom Rinaldi is, he is one of the greatest, not just sportscasters, but sports storytellers of our time. And a few years ago, I want to say it was right at the beginning of my career. Maybe it was just before it started. You know how SportsCenter has those like SC featured, where it's like maybe every Sunday, every so often they do a feature story on some sort of athlete or coach or sports figure or what have you. It's like beyond the field of play kind of stories, right? And there was a story that he did, and you could probably look it up on YouTube, and I implore folks to do so because it'll make you cry. It's the story of the red bandana, and it was about this lacrosse player who always wore a red bandana when he played, and turns out he was working at the World Trade Center around 9/11, and obviously tragedy struck, and he did not make it out of the rubble, but he was credited with saving lives there at the World Trade Center. And there was a woman that he saved who, if I remember the story correctly, talked with his parents or something like this, that she remembers seeing a man saving people with a red bandana. And I don't know, man, that like every time I either talk about that story or listen to that story or watch that story, like when I go back to the idea of like making people feel something, you know what I mean? That story made me feel like some type of way. And I have no connection to lacrosse, to that athlete, to any of these people, not even to Tom Rinaldi, but he made me feel like I did. And every time I need a boost in this job to maybe some inspiration to go forward, maybe I'm looking for something, some sort of emotion to grasp on when it comes to a certain story, whether it was a similar emotion that I felt or not, I go back and watch that one. And so that is, to me, my favorite story that's ever been told in the form of broadcasting. And it's just from a simple standpoint of the way it made me feel and how personable it was to people that I've never met before. It has me rooting for a family and for an individual that I didn't know about the day prior. So that is probably the one thing that I would say is like a canon event, as they call it, or one of those canon moments that I saw that story for some reason, and it stuck with me this long time, and it continues to be a driving force of inspiration as I continue to do this crazy profession.
If your network came to you today and said, "Hey, you have carte blanche. We need you to develop and produce, and if you want to star in it, whatever it is, and we're going to fund it 100%. We just want you to do it, signature to who you are." What is that show? What does it look like?
It is a show that, and it's taken a little inspiration from another show that already exists. I would take a globe or a map and throw a dartboard on it, and wherever that map or wherever the dartboard lands on that map, I have to go find a sports story in that place. I'm a firm believer in this business, and I've seen it in everywhere that I've gone, that everybody has a story. You just got to find it. Everywhere you could look potentially has a story. And so I want to prove that and show that to viewers. And I think we as people, we can connect with each other in a way through storytelling that is so great. I think that's why a reason I'm a big fan of movies and like a film buff is because I just love the idea of a narrative from beginning to end. And so I think the unpredictability nature of it, of me being a journalist, having to go find it, but also then capturing a portion of life that maybe people wouldn't even go on that map themselves. Let's say it was in the middle of nowhere of, New Mexico, let's say, just for the sake of the example. People probably that would see the story would never go to a place like that, but they would then they would feel a connection to either a person or an organization or something in that area through sport, because I have to keep who I am. But I think that would be my pitch for a show. I don't know what we would call it, Journeying with Julian or something like that. But that would be like the ideal show if they said, "Hey, you can do whatever you want, just go cook." That would be it.
The storyteller's story is generally the one that is seldom told. But I think a lot of times it's the most important. So when you look at, say, like an Oprah, a lot of times you don't hear as much of the story of Oprah as you do of the stories that she's drawing out of people. Same thing with Letterman, same thing with Fallon, same thing with, say, like a Linda Cohn, who just retired, who's an absolute legend, Southern California woman too. When it's all said and done, Julian, what's the story that you want them telling about you?
When it's all said and done, the same way that I felt about the kid with the red bandana and how that makes me feel when it comes to not just that story, but Tom Rinaldi. I want those people that I told the story on and the people who consume the stories that I tell to think of my stories, maybe not as the prestige of SportsCenter, but in the same ilk of maybe how it made them feel. I want people to, talk about me in a way that, hey, he made this community better. He made me root for my community. He made me root for these athletes and these coaches more than maybe I already did, or learn about these athletes and coaches and now root for them after becoming educated about them. And he made me feel a type of way with the storytelling that he did that I will remember for the rest of my life. And so that is, I think, the greatest impact that us as storytellers can leave, whether it's books, whether it's film, whether it's television. The creators of these shows aren't going to live forever, but these stories and these narratives will. It's the reason why, we still, watch. Every kid that grows up watches those Disney movies, the same ones that you and I probably watched when we were kids, right? It's because that there's such ingrained in our culture to where, it's almost like part of the human criteria and requirement to watch, The Lion King or Toy Story or something like that, right? I want my stories to be remembered, even if it's for a short time in those communities, in a way to where it made them feel something that they want to take with for the rest of their life.
Start one, bench one, cut one. Jordan, Kobe, LeBron.
Man, this is where you're getting me in real trouble here. This is the toughest question you asked all day. Start one, cut one, bench one. Okay. I am probably cutting LeBron. And that's no disrespect to Bron. I love what he did for the Lakers. He brought them out of irrelevancy. But I can't cut Kobe Bryant and I can't cut Michael Jordan. So starting, I probably would start MJ because Kobe is seen by many as kind of like the carbon copy, right? And the closest thing movement-wise and mentality-wise that we got to Jordan. And if I know anything about my Lakers and their head coach, Phil Jackson, that was so great for LA, it's that he tested Kobe a lot of times. And he would put things out there to motivate an already maniacal kind of worker that Kobe was. So maybe saying, hey, Kobe, you're going to be on the bench. He's going to play that much harder. So that's why I bench Kobe, even though he is my favorite athlete of all time and the greatest to me.
Julian, you're incredible, man. I started the podcast because of my two kids, 14, Maddox, he's a sports guy, 17, McKenna, who is in the arts, and she's actually just about to go tomorrow. She's going to Vogue Summer School in New York City.
Wow.
She's gonna be a senior this year. She's 17 years old. She's gonna be in the city for 2 weeks by herself. So Dad's praying, like, if I wasn't a God-fearing man, which I am, I would be God-fearing these next 2 weeks, right? And so there's a lot of prayer in this place. My son, who's the sports fan, we actually just got a chance to go to Game 5. We were there in San Antonio to see the Knicks beat the Spurs, which was just such a cool, like, lifetime memory with him and I.
Yeah.
But I started it because I didn't want them to worship idols. I wanted them to be inspired by icons like you, and especially with my son, like he loves the broadcasting side. He loves this side of it. I wanted him to be inspired by icons like yourself. Like, what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
My advice first for McKenna, and you said she's 17?
17.
Going to be as a senior in high school, right? You're going to be in New York for 2 weeks. And you've got obviously the rest of your adult life ahead of you. I would say to her is as much as maybe at that age, I know I wanted to grow up fast and get onto my career path and all of that. And that's great to have goals and stuff. But I would say, don't be afraid once in a while to take a step back and enjoy where you're at. If it's in New York, if you're walking down Times Square with a bacon, egg, and cheese, and you're in a rush somewhere, take a breather, take it all in, and enjoy those moments, because no matter how much time you think you have, these memories and these moments in this lifetime are fleeting. And I wish that, especially when I was younger and I don't live at home anymore. I've lived away from my folks and loved ones for the last 10 years for the sacrifice of the job. I wish I did that a lot more. And so whenever I do get a chance to see family, to see friends, or to be in big time moments like I am now through my profession, I always take some time to step back and smell the roses a bit. Like, kind of a funny story. Every time I go to a new arena to cover a game, I always take time to go up to the very tippy top of the nosebleeds and take a picture and just sit there and take it in and then I framed the picture after the fact, and it's hard to see here in my apartment, but I have a couple hung up of these stadium photos. But it allows me to, as a goal, I set myself as a goal to, give yourself the grace to be present where your feet are and enjoy every second of where life has brought you. So that's what I would say to McKenna. Your other son, Maddox, when it comes to sports broadcasting, if you already have the passion for it, you said he's a sports person. You said it was an awesome moment to be there at Game 5 of the finals. I think I've seen him in some videos. He was wearing some Titans gear too that you had. The passion is already there, and the passion will get you to where you need to go. I know he was, denied entry into the broadcasting program at the high school. That does not matter one bit, because as long as he has the passion and truly loves the way sports make him feel, he's going to be set, and he's not going to take no for an answer. He's going to hear a lot more no's than yeses in this business, in this profession. But there are a lot of people who are also in this profession who don't have the same passion for sports. And so I would say that as long as he keeps that kid in himself, the kiddish love for sports, that'll take him where he needs to go.
I tell you, it has been an absolute pleasure, man. I was so excited last night, leading up to getting to spend some time with you. It's been probably about 3 or 4 weeks since we set it up. And
yeah,
I want to tell you, and I don't know if you realize it, but your mentor that said that you need to pay it forward, I was raising my hands when you were saying it, is because, I mean, dude, you responded so quick to me and joking. And I hope it came off as a joke when I was introducing you, when we first started off, that you had to ask your parents if you could come out and play. I was referring to the network. And yeah. I encountered that the first time with Phil Murphy. He's on Sports Center, and I reached out to Phil, and he hit me back right away. And, but he said, I've got to check with ESPN to make sure. And this was before he was in the Australian market. This was before he started to come into prominence, on Sports Center and things like that. But I just want to tell you how much it means, man. And you're an unbelievable human being. I want more people to know, like when you were saying that, about the, your prominence or whatever it is, like, I think from a parent standpoint, we want our kids to see you in front of the camera. We want to see more of that, because I'm taking my son to go see Forrest Frank next week, and he can listen to the music, and it's such a positive message. And it's for you, I want you to understand, I mean, the light that you have, man, and the things that you're doing, and not only the things that you're doing, but the reason why you're doing them. The world needs more of that. We need to hear more of that. And it's been an absolute honor to be able to sit down with you, man.
Well, no, I appreciate it. Likewise, the feeling is mutual. And again, the for lack of a better term, love the vibe of the podcast. Love the positive energy. And, you mentioned you're still kind of fairly new in this whole podcasting thing, but it doesn't seem like it, because just the way you come off and the charisma is there. And that's what gets these guests to feel comfortable. Knowing what it's like to be behind that mic over there, that's what it takes to get these guests comfortable to come on and have great stories and great conversations. On top of the fact that I am very jealous of the setup that you have over there. You have, what Jordans are those behind you?
Those are the fours. Those are the fours right there.
I lose track of the number, but you have a really dope setup behind you. And when we do our podcast with me and Brad, I have my golf clubs. There's a Titans photo right there. Yeah. But I'm trying to get like you, man, when it comes to the overall setup that you got back there. It's a legitimate one.
Thank you. Well, I want to call the shot because my son has never been to a Titans game, so or to a Titans home game. We go to Vegas, and we're actually going to Baltimore, which is gonna hurt my heart to be around that much purple. But he is a Derrick Henry fan. You know, I mean, we believe that he'll come back at some point. But I'm gonna hopefully I'm gonna bring him this year to a home game, and
Okay.
I want to sit down with you and Brad in person and run it. You know what I mean? I just think that there would be so much great energy inside of it, which I think would be a lot of fun. And I need you to say it with your chest though, because I know when I asked you this question, you know, I knew that you didn't want to get yourself in trouble, but now you're already in trouble because you already said it. You said that you would have a close game with Tajay Spears and you would smash Tony Pollard on the basketball court. But I need you to say it with your chest, and I need you to address them before we get off this podcast. So I'm going to give you the floor right now and let you hit it, because that Long Beach, I need to hear Long Beach coming out. I don't need to hear. And for those of you who don't know Long Beach, I know Long Beach. It's not that far. We just went up there the other day, and what he's talking about, it's no joke. And I don't need broadcaster polished Julian to say this. I need Long Beach, blacktop, 110 degrees, suicide sprints, outdoors, AAU, Julian, to tell Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard what's going to happen to them on the court.
Hey, well, I'll just say this. Out of every person that does TV in this Nashville market, nobody is beating me one-on-one. So that's number one. And it wouldn't even be close. So that is why Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, let's run it, man, because I'm going to give you guys a game. That's for sure.
Dude, I love it, man. Dude, you're incredible, man. I love you. And I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life. That's the thing. Most people think when I interview someone, they're like, oh, well, you kind of connected with them. No, I'm saying like you're in. You know, I don't know if you know I have this show. I have 3 shows actually 4 now on the podcast. So I have one where I interview people like you, icons. Then I have commentary where I go live, or I do like 15 to 20 minutes to fill up your soul. I created a show called You Have to Meet My Friends, where I go live and I randomly call my friends and they don't know they're on the podcast till they're on the podcast. And then we created the History Box, where the history hunter from Pawn Stars, he comes on and he has a box from World War II, ammunition box, and inside it he has artifacts from like everywhere. And we had the gavel from the Nuremberg trials. He had a piece of the Hindenburg the last time. He had a book from Copernicus, and I don't know what they are. We just lift open the box and we just pull them out and do the thing. But when I'm saying that, that show, You Have to Meet My Friends, literally people get calls randomly, and they end up on the show. So that was a lot of fun. So I mean, now you can't erase your phone number from my place. So
is that just a little bit of teaser foreshadowing?
Well, what's so cool, man, is what I do is I take a person like yourself that's an icon, and then I'll be on the phone with one of my buddies who's a huge sports fan, and then I'll call you, and they actually get to meet you. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's
and so
yeah.
It's really cool. So like Brad Johnson, quarterback from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. So Brad's a good friend, and one of my buddies is a huge football fan, and so I was able to call Brad while he's on the phone, and Brad talks to him, and it's like like have fun, like that kind of stuff, which is fun.
No, that's awesome. I love meeting viewers and fans in public. If they want to stop me and talk to me at Publix, we're down.
Yes. The funniest thing as we go is when I moved to Memphis, because I lived in Memphis for years. Actually, I moved away the inaugural season where the Titans played in Memphis, which sucked because that was my team. But when I got there, we were at a party, and the girl was like, hey, I'm about to go to K. Roger. Can I get you anything? And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, K. Roger. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I'm about to go to K. Roger. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she's like, I'm about to go to the grocery store. And I said, do you mean Kroger? And so K. Roger.
Oh my gosh.
You'll never not hear that in your life. Like you always, every time you see Kroger now, that's K. Roger.
That is hilarious.
So, hey, man, I seriously, I want to thank you so much. Hey, can you stick around for just a second? We're going to run a commercial, and then we're going to talk about stuff we won't let the public know.
Sure.
I'm just joking. Just stick around for a second, man. You're officially off the hot seat. Julian, you're incredible. Mininsohn. Did I say it right? Mininsohn. Got it.
Got it.
You're the man. You're officially off the hot seat, buddy. Peace, love, and soul.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And this the vibe that raised us, made us, saved us. Love so strong that the hard times praised us. From base life roots to the freeway nights, we turn small grooms into launch pad flights. Yeah, this the vibe that